Let's talk about how to name variables. In Python, we use small case letters and Latin letters only. You can use different letters or different characters, but in Python convention says that we should use lowercase letters to have names for variables. In case we have multiple words, we join them by underscore, and we should use meaningful names instead of abbreviations or just random letters ABC and so on. So for example, H is better name of the variable than A. And also some good examples are temperature and student count. And bad examples are A, temp as a abbreviation for temperature or temporary or whatever. So it's already hard to understand what's meant by this variable. And then some examples of uppercase letters which we should not use in Python, although they can be used. It's syntactically they are correct. In Python, we say that everything is an object. And what happens is that every value where the variable can point, it's actually an object. And so the variable actually points always to an object. We will talk about objects later. This is a different topic in general, but it's nice to know that everything is an object, and everywhere where we have variables, those point to objects. This 7 or 9 or 11 here, those are all objects. The name or the string or the text here is also an object. And as was pointed out, the variable has no data type. What it means is that we can have the same variable and have different types of values inside this variable. So, for example, there is a meaningful variable here. It starts with value 10, which is an integer, or as we can see in the code, we can print out the type for a variable. What happens is that it takes the value where this variable points and gets the data type of this value. For example, this 10 or whatever number it is here, if I print out the type of x, I will get the data type of this value where it points to. Now I can assign new value to this same variable. So in my example, I could say that x is, let's say, Ago. Now what happens is that x doesn't, okay, so maybe I should do something like that. Now the x points to this value in memory, which is a string. And now if I print out the type for x, I can see that the data type is string. It's the line here. So it takes the value where this x points to and calculates or checks the type for this value. And also, if I divide two numbers, I get the float. So even if the numbers themselves are integers, the result is a float, and here I can see the result, or this data type is float now. And the values themselves in memory, they have data type. And what's shown here is that if I take two values, caret and number 13, those are separate two variables, so they are variable 1 and variable 2. They both point to different values in memory. What happens is that I cannot add those two values. I would be able to do that if they both were strings or they both would be integers, but I cannot add integer and string. And this gives us an error. So if I try to take Ago and add 9 to it, I get an error because you cannot add a string and the number. If I actually would like to do that. So to kind of concat this 13 into this caret, I have to convert this value inside this variable into string. So here we cast, or we kind of change the, we don't actually change. The value itself in the memory remains still integer, but for this calculation, I convert it into string, and then if I have two strings, I can concat them. So basically I just take the first one and take the second one and concatenate those two strings. So I get caret 13. And if I want to add something to this int value, I can add two integers, so there is no problem here. But the point is that even though this calculation here, or this adding two variables, the Python, when the code is not executed, it doesn't know whether it's correct or whether it gives us an error. In some languages where we do have data types for variables, it can give us an error already when compiling the code, so before executing the code. Now the problem can be that I execute the code. For example, I ask the values from the user, and maybe we expect that the user enters numbers, but for some reason he or she enters letters instead of numbers. And now my code breaks because I was expecting maybe numbers and then try to add those two numbers and I get an error. So you have to be aware that you can have different types of values inside one variable.